Hi, I'm Benny Parsons. One of the truly great families in racing is the Allisons. First of all, let's take a look at the careers of Davey and Bobby. Then we'll go to Hueytown, Alabama for a fascinating conversation. Hueytown, Alabama, home of the celebrated Alabama Gang. The ringleader of the group, Bobby Allison, raced through this small town in 1959 and decided to set up shop. He worked his way up the racing ranks and quickly gained a reputation as stock car's toughest driver. 84 victories put him among the elite in his field, but his career was cut short. In June of 1988, on an average racing Sunday at Pocono, a simple flat tire brought Bobby's storybook career to a close. Three years after the crash, Bobby is still involved in racing as a car owner. And when he's not at one of his two race shops, he enjoys relaxing at home with wife Judy and fishing in his backyard pond. The Allison legacy began in 1957 when at 19, Bobby defied his parents' wishes and began racing the modified circuit under the assumed name of Robert Sunderman. His parents caught on, but Bobby's career had already begun. At the age of 21, Bobby and younger brother Donnie loaded up their truck and headed for the fast tracks of Alabama. By the end of 1967, Donnie had won NASCAR's Rookie of the Year award, but it was Bobby's career that took off. Four straight modified championships gave Bobby the confidence to challenge NASCAR's finest. As his victories piled up, so did his fans. Bobby was voted Winston Cup's most popular driver 6 times. And in 1983 at Riverside, at the age of 43, he won his first and only Winston Cup championship. 5 years later came the Pocono crash. Bobby spent nearly 4 months in the hospital. He had a broken shoulder and ribs, a fractured leg, and a head injury. While the latter injury has kept him off the track, Bobby's love for the racing action has kept him involved in NASCAR. Being team owner for Hut Strickland leaves him with a unique problem, challenging his son, Davey.
Well, he only wants me to beat Davey by about that much, so if that tells you anything. You know, when Davey wins, he don't share his money with him like I do, so that kind of helps make up his mind if there is any doubt.
Davey, like his dad, learned a love for cars early in life. At the age of 12, he spent all his spare time with his nose under a hood. The day he graduated from high school, he formed a racing crew of teenagers known as the Peach Fuzz Gang. Davey retraced his daddy's footsteps up the ranks. By the fall of '86, it was his turn to take the Winston Cup plunge.
There it is, Davey Allison wins!
In 1987, he added to the Allison winning tradition with a hard-earned victory at Talladega. Earlier in the race, his father blew a tire in the tri-oval and flew into the front stretch fence. Bobby escaped serious injury, and Davey was able to regroup from the side of his father's wreck and take the checkered flag. The 1991 season was full of smiles for Davey. He collected 3 first-half wins. His daughter Crystal celebrated her first birthday, and in July, his wife Liz gave birth to their son, Robbie. Could Robbie be the next Hueytown hero? Well, the first thing we got to talk about is what's wrong with your hand?
Somehow I knew that was going to be the first thing that came up. And it comes under that title of something we were talking about a little bit earlier about being young and dumb and learning all these valuable lessons. And one of them that I learned at Talladega is that when the race is over and your temperature's up, you don't take your frustrations out on a solid wall.
You hit a wall?
Yeah, in my trailer.
You ever do that, Bobby? You ever take your frustration out on
I'm afraid I did a time or two way on back there, Benny, you know.
He gets it honest, right?
I think he probably gets that honest, yeah.
I remember one time you was trying to hit Cale's helmet. Did you hurt your hand when you was trying to hit Cale's helmet that time?
Well, no, I was being pretty careful on that. I was trying to aim my swings where they missed his helmet. He was certainly using his helmet instead of his fist, which that was quite a deal.
Donnie and Cale, just to bring you up to speed, Donnie, Bobby's brother, and Cale Yarborough on the last lap going down the back straightaway got together and they both crashed.
Yeah.
And Richard Petty went on to win the race.
Yeah.
And Bobby stopped over there. I think Cale and Donnie got in a little scuffle. You stopped to referee.
They were way separated even. They never even spoke to each other. And I stopped to see if Donnie wanted to ride back to the garage area. And Cale had some frustration he needed to get rid of, I guess. So, you know, he came over to run over to my car, and it wasn't the right situation for me to just leave, and a little scuffle did take place, yeah.
Well, now, back in the 60s, there's another family very big in auto racing, the Pettys. Now, was it you and Richard or you and Maurice that had a little scuffle?
Well, actually, it was Maurice, me and Maurice.
This was when? Back in 60?
It had to be 66 in Islip, Long Island. Maybe, I guess 67. I had run my little Chevelle in Islip, you know. I think I had won the race. And Richard had raced pretty good, but had got into me trying to get by me and bent his fender in on his tire, which made him have to pit, and that helped me to win the race. And I guess Richard was pretty calm about the other, or had it pretty much under control, but Maurice came after me. And you know, I really liked Maurice, and I still really like Maurice an awful lot. But it was in the heat of battle, and we had to have a little round and round.
How old were you in the 66 or 7? How old were you?
I was either 5 or 6.
So you remember this?
Actually, I wasn't along on that trip, and I don't remember too much about it other than hearing some of the stories that people have told and hearing all the different versions.
Now, when you started going to the racetrack, Kyle and you were how much difference in age?
Kyle and I are 6 months apart. He's born in June, and I was born 6 months later in February.
Were you and Kyle buddies?
Yeah, we had a good time out in the infield. He and I and Buddy Baker's 2 boys, Brian and Brandon, and my cousin Kenny, and there was a whole bunch of us that hung around in the infield, and we could care less what happened on the racetrack.
All that stuff didn't matter to you?
No, not we. You know, we all wanted our dads to win, but you know, whatever happened between them, I guess we let that be between them, and we just kept having a good time in the infield.
Have you always wanted to follow in your father's footsteps?
From the time I was a little kid, you know, as far back as I can remember, all I've ever wanted to do is to work on race cars and drive them. And, you know, I figured that even when I was really young, the best way to figure out what was going on was to watch what he did and try to hang around. You know, a lot of times they felt like I was in the way or that I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on, but I'd be sitting back and my ears would be wide open and my eyes would be wide open. And, you know, I can remember a lot of things that went on back then that he even helped me as I was getting started.
You've always had a race car basically in the backyard, haven't you, Bobby?
Just about always.
You grew up in Miami. How old were you when you moved to Hueytown?
Well, I guess I was 21. And what happened, I graduated from high school when I was 17, got a chance to go to Wisconsin, go to work for Mercury Outboard Motors for Carl Kiekafer. And while I was there that spring, you know, through the whole winter, that spring, Kiekafer came walking through one day and did his typical deal, get your suitcase and go to the race car shop in Charlotte or you're fired. Well, that was just right for me. You know, most of the other guys hated to hear that from Kiekafer because that's how he recruited his help for the race car shop. But it was perfect for me. So at age 18, I went to his race car shop there at Charlotte. And The drivers that year were Buck Baker, Speedy Thompson, Jimmy Thompson, Frank Mundy, and perfect deal for, you know, for a youngster that was really that interested in racing.
So, why did you decide to come to Alabama? I mean, was there family here, or?
No, it's just kind of a crazy deal. I went back to Miami. I spent a year with Kiefer, and that summer of '56, I went back to Miami and just started hanging around with Bobby Johns, who was a really strong short track racer from that area, and had a then Grand National car that they ran once in a while. And so I just hung around his place and kind of used up all the money that I'd saved up while I was working for Kiefer, and finally had to go to work down there. Got busy, built a modified, started racing a modified, and got that a little bit better and a little bit better, and really was kind of pleased with how that was going. But racing in South Florida back then, if you won the feature, it might be $25. Or, you know, on a really good night, it might be $50. But, and of course, I wasn't winning yet. You know, I was finishing on back some. And a friend of mine's girlfriend moved to Jasper, Tennessee. And so he needed an excuse to go see her. So he talked to another friend of mine who had a little modified car that I drove once in a while about taking the modified car and coming up here looking for racing territory. And we didn't know whether we were going to Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee, but they heard there was good tracks in Alabama. Well, the first week they took off and they went to where he could see his girlfriend. And they saw tracks at a lot of different places, but they never ran. And they came back home, yeah, there's good tracks through Georgia and up into Tennessee, and they say there's really nice ones over in Alabama. So that second week, I got released from that. I had hurt my hand really bad in a garage accident, and, you know, was going around with a, you know, with a big bandage on my hand, and I got released from the doctor, and so it was time to go back racing again. And I said, I'm going to Alabama. And so I came into Alabama just down east of Dothan, stopped at a gas station, asked the guy, where's the racetrack? And he said, well, there's not one right here, but there's a real nice one up at Montgomery, right up this road, 100 and some miles. So we went to Montgomery. We're going around the bypass in Montgomery, and I saw this beautiful little 34 Chevy race car sitting there with a Cadillac engine with slick tires on it, which that really got my attention because I really wanted to run the paved tracks, and up till now, any tracks after you left South Florida were dirt tracks. So this little 34 Chevy was sitting there. I stopped in that gas station, and Bo Freeman came walking out. Hi, pleased to meet you. I'm Bo Freeman. Let's go in and have a glass of tea and talk about racing. So we did. And he said, well, the racetrack's right out here. I'll take you out there and we'll go look at it. So went out and looked at Montgomery Speedway. Beautiful half-mile paved track. And the promoter came out and said, well, we run tomorrow night, but they're running up at Dixie Speedway in Birmingham tonight. So we said, well, which way is that? You know, jumped in the truck and away we went. And got to Dixie Speedway, and I run 5th in the heat, 5th in the semi, and 5th in the feature. And Donnie rode along with me, my brother Donnie, you know. And we had been eating peaches and sleeping in the truck and so forth for a couple days because we had started out and headed north with really no place, no real aim of where we were going to go. And we just kind of wandered. And so I told Donnie, I said, well, I'll go to the pay window and get a couple bucks and we'll go get a sandwich and, you know, we'll go find a place to sleep in the truck on our way to Montgomery for tomorrow night. Went up to the pay window and that guy just kept counting money. $135 for 5th, 5th, and 5th. I said, wow, I have died and gone to heaven. It's a beautiful racetrack, nice people, and this great big stack of money. Went back down to the truck and I told Donnie, I said, we're going over that place and have one of them $1.99 steaks, and we're going to go get one of them $2 motel rooms. We're in high cotton. So, and we did. went down to Montgomery, and of course we had a Chevy-powered car, and the car Bo Freeman had, Sonny Black was the driver. It was Cadillac-powered, and at the time there were a few of them, and they were the strong cars at the time. And they kind of said, you know, don't even go to Montgomery with that Chevrolet. So I said, well, you know, I may run way in the back, but I'm gonna go. So went out to Montgomery, had fast time, sat on the pole. So won the heat, won the match race, but Sonny Black had kind of watched me, and, you know, was a really neat guy. He, you know, was kind of carefree and made his living out of the race car most of the time and didn't do much else, but he did pay attention to the race car. When they dropped the flag for the start of the feature, I was on the pole and he was outside, and he took that Cadillac and just jumped it right over in front of me. Didn't do a thing wrong, but he stayed in my way the whole feature. He won and I finished second. That was still pretty good, and of course, by doing good in the preliminaries and then second in the feature, the stack of money was really nice, about $300, you know, and I, wow.
You are really in heaven now.
Really. So, went on over to the Peach Bowl, Atlanta, Georgia for Sunday night. That's where I met T.C. Hunt the first time, and several of the other guys that I'd known along the way, you know, were there. In fact, that was the first place I met the Gazaway brothers. They owned a car that raced at the Peach Bowl. But anyway, went to the Peach Bowl. And then we went up and camped out in this gal's yard outside of Jasper, Tennessee. Just went and slept in the truck, you know, in a big yard. But that was pretty close to Chattanooga, so I decided I'd go over to Honest Charlie's. I'd heard of Honest Charlie's Speed Shop for years and years. So went over to Honest Charlie's, and, you know, I had all this pocket full of money, you know, so I went ahead and bought a couple of things from my race car and went back and in that yard and worked on the car for a couple of days. Went back down to Dixie Speedway for the following Friday night. Backed the car off the trailer, ran about 2 laps of practice and dropped a valve. And I really was not ready to drop any valve. But I really got lucky that it did no damage to the head, just broke the valve. I just didn't have one, I just wasn't in the race for that night. So one of the Birmingham racers that was really doing well, Harry Mewburn, owned a car that Bill Latham drove, and no, Earl Apps drove it at the time. Anyway, Harry said, come by my shop in the morning, I'll give you the pieces you need to fix your motor. So went by there, got some pieces, went down to Bo Freeman's station at Montgomery, Alabama, took the engine out. In the meantime, the other 2 boys, Gil Hearn and Kenny Andrews, Gil Hearn had quit Kenny and decided to go home, and Kenny came to me, what do I do? I said, well, let Donnie drive it. So Donnie and Kenny had gone to the racetrack, and I stayed at Bo's station, patched up my engine, got to Montgomery in time to start last in the feature, won my first feature of my career that night at Montgomery. And that's what got me to Alabama.
Did you run local tracks Friday, Saturday nights?
I started off right here at the fairgrounds in Birmingham in 1979, and ran. In 1979, I ran Birmingham, Montgomery, and a little place over here called Sayre, Alabama. And then after he got started up here a few years later, they built a racetrack down in Dover they call Rocket Speedway, and went down there and ran once that year. And you know, it was pretty neat, you know, to be able to race on the same racetracks that Dad raced on. And what even was neater was when we started winning some of them.
Did you drive for someone else, or did you build your own car to begin with like Bobby did?
Well, I had started building a car when I was 16, and we had some pretty neat things working back then. A lot of people remember the old half-leaf springs that bolted up solid to the frame and hinged on the rear end, and it worked kind of like a 3-point suspension works now. But I had started building this car, and the rules didn't have anything specific in it other than you had to have a stock frame. It didn't say that you couldn't use a Ford frame rail on a Chevrolet Snout, which is what we did. We put the Ford frame rails on there because they had more room to mount the half-leaf springs under it. And I had this car, I had the frame all the way built and had started building the roll cage and was getting ready to put the body on it. Well, two things happened. First of all, the local track inspector came by and he says, the car is not legal. You can't run this car. The frame is not stock. I said, yeah, it is. It's stock Ford frame rails and stock Chevrolet Snout. He said, it has to be stock from front to back. You can't change this out. About the same time, my grades had started going down. And my dad and my mom both said, look, if you're going to race, we see that you want to do it and that you're willing to do the work, but if you want to do it, you got to graduate from high school first. Well, I was 16 years old and I was in the 10th grade. So the first thought that goes through my mind is, man, I won't be able to race for 2 years now. And I start thinking, how can I get through this deal and graduate early? And it hit me. I said, I'm going to summer school. Not to catch up, but to get ahead. And so I ended up graduating half a year early. I graduated in January of '79 and immediately went racing.
What did you think? The first time that you looked in the mirror and your dad was going to pass you or whatever, or you was going to pass him, however it worked out?
See, while I was running on the All-Pro and All-American Challenge Series down here on this southeastern region, you know, we ran all over Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, and Mississippi. We had a car that I had built, and the guys that worked in the shop with me, we had put the thing together ourselves. It was not a high-dollar car, and it was a real learning process for me to really get the thing going, and we did get to where we were running pretty good. We won 4 races, which were local races out here at Birmingham and Montgomery, but none of the big races, none of the 100-lappers. But one night he comes to Montgomery driving somebody else's car, a guy by the name of Bobby Brown, who lived in Mississippi. And I've got my own car and going around Montgomery pretty good, and I think tonight's the night that I can win this 100-lapper, you know. And I'm running about 3rd or 4th, and I look in the mirror and I see this green and white number 88 coming, and he's coming fast. And I was running as hard as I could go, and I ended up spinning out trying to stay in front of him. And I thought to myself, you know, that was really dumb. And so they put me to the tail end of the pack, and he ended up finishing like 3rd or 4th, and I ended up finishing like 7th or 8th. But I remember thinking to myself, I ran extra hard just because he was there, and ended up costing myself a good finish, because I probably would have finished about 2nd or 3rd if I'd have just drove the car and not worried about him.
One of the most dramatic moments in stock car racing was 1988 Daytona 500. You won the race, and Davey was a close second. You don't remember that, do you?
No, I don't.
Do you remember it?
I remember it well, and it wasn't as close as everybody thinks, because I made a run at him going in the 3rd turn, and I got just about parallel with him, and I looked out of the corner of my eye, and I saw him look down there. It was like he had this evilest grin on him. He mashed a little harder and went, drove back out in front of me. I said, he had something else in store for us.
You don't remember because in '88 in Pocono,
Yeah.
worst wreck of your life.
Yeah.
Still haven't been able to drive since then.
No, I did a few slow laps in the car that Clifford was driving early this year, but really easy laps, just feel the car, but it did feel good, you know. It was a chance to at least be back behind the wheel once. You know, real early on, I got to get in the airplane, and that was really a giant step for me, you know, in recuperation. It was something that I enjoyed and something that took a little bit extra to accomplish, but I was able to do it, and I felt good about that. But as far as actually driving a race car anywhere close to race speed, I haven't done that yet, but it may be a little closer, and maybe even just a little closer on kind of taking those few easy laps back a few months ago.
I'll tell you how much closer he is. When I did this, he says, if you do that again, I'm going to talk to your car owner about me driving that thing.
You do miss the driving, don't you, Bubba?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. You know, I've had to say over and over, Benny, to a lot of people that standing in the pits is not even close to sitting behind that wheel. It's just way better than being in that hospital.
Yeah, or in the grandstands.
Yeah, well, I was in the grandstands the other night for a while at Indianapolis Raceway Park, and that wasn't as good as being down there in the pits, but that was better than being in the hospital too.
There's a whole lot of things better than being in the hospital, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You don't remember anything about the crash at Pocono, do you?
Nothing at all. I remember a little tiny piece of the driver's meeting, and you know why I did that? You know, I was talking to Dr. Stevens up in Allentown, and you know, Doc, you know, I'm remembering some things, but still nothing in the racing, you know, nothing in the Winston Cup racing. So he said, well, go over to Pocono and get the pace car and ride around, go down there in the corner and stop and look back and see if that does anything. So I did all that, and no, it didn't do a thing. I stopped and looked back up that straightaway, just like I must have been the day that I crashed there. But as I left there, going back to the garage area, I remembered just that much of the driver's meeting the morning of the wreck. And that had to be kind of cute, and I guess I can tell it. But Dick Beatty called roll. And of course, studying this thing, I find out that there was a reason that I said what I did. Dick Beatty called roll and said, before we start, you know, everybody's here, before we start, anybody got any questions? And I said, yeah, Dick, I got a question. What should a guy do if some blankety blank spins him out? Because what I researched was Darrell Waltrip had spun me the week before at the final race at Riverside. And I was pretty hot about that for some reason. Don't know any of the reasons yet or anything, but yeah. I was pretty hot. So I said, what does a guy do? What should a guy do if some blankety blank spins him out? And Michael Waltrip says, I'm not the blankety blank, I'm just his brother. And I remember that like Michael's sitting right here, right now. But that one little 15 or 20 seconds of a year ain't much to remember out of a year.
You was in the race when Bobby had the crash.
Yeah, I was. We had qualified pretty good, and they threw the green flag, and we went down across the tunnel turn. And as we were coming back up toward turn 3, Robert Yates keyed the mic, and he says, look, there's been a bad wreck at the tunnel turn. And he said, your dad's been involved in it. He said, just, you know, be careful, come on back to the caution flag, and be ready when you get back there for what you're going to see, because it's bad. And it's like the world just stopped turning right then, you know. All I could think of was to hurry up and get to the caution flag and then get back there and see if everything was okay. And so as we got back there, I stopped, and I could see that he was in the car, slumped over, and he wasn't moving. The car had been torn up pretty bad and hitting the driver's door. And I couldn't tell if he was breathing or not. I was trying to look and see what was going on. And as all the cars went by and got outside, I had to get back going again. I tried to call one of the safety crew guys over, and he wouldn't come. He just kept blowing for me to get out of the way, screaming and hollering. And I went ahead and caught up with Pat, and we came back around. I stopped again, which was the second time, and I waved for him to come over there, and he wouldn't even listen to me. He just kept yelling for me to get out of there, get out of there. I was in the way and all this stuff, and I was trying to look and see what they were doing to Dad, whether it was trying to just help him get out of the car, or whether he was unconscious, or, well, I could tell he was unconscious, but I was trying to tell what they were doing. Were they trying to keep him alive? Were they trying to get him back going, or what? You know, and I was really shook up about it. And as all the cars got out of sight again, I took off and came back around, and I stopped, and this same guy is screaming at me to get out of the way, that I'm in everybody's way, and I'm trying to look and see, and I'm trying to get him to come to the window, and he finally comes over to the window, and he leans down to tell me that I'm going to have to get out of there. And I reached up and I grabbed him by the shirt, and I pulled him through the window net part of the way, and I said, that's my dad in that car, and I want to know what's going on. If you can't tell me, get somebody over here that can. And the guy looked at me, and he was in total shock, because he just had never dawned on him who I was when I was stopping back there. And it must have shook him up, because he took off running around there, and he got somebody, and another guy came over to the right side window, and said, look, he's hurt bad, but he is breathing, and you know, we're trying to get everything under control. You know, if you stop back here the next time, I'll try to tell you what's going on or whatever. So anyhow, we made like 7 or 8 laps, and every time I would stop, and they would come over and tell me more about what was going on, and you know, that was helping me out. And then I was keeping the pits updated too, because his pits were right alongside of where ours were at the time, and his guys were wanting to know what was going on, and so I was trying to help keep them updated. But it's probably the most shook up I've ever been in my life, no doubt about it. It is definitely the most shook up I've ever been in my life. And you know, a lot of people ask me, how did we go on and finish that race that day? And the only thing I can tell them is because I know that's what he would have wanted me to do no matter what. And I saw him do the same thing with Donnie at Charlotte in 1981. When Donnie was injured in the Coca-Cola 600, he went on and won that race that day.
How long were you in the hospital, Bobby?
I guess a total of 3 months between Pennsylvania and then they brought me here to Lakeshore Hospital here in Birmingham.
So 14, 15 weeks in the hospital. Yeah. Do you remember the times at Allentown? Do you remember being in the hospital now?
I don't remember anything about Allentown. I don't remember anything until it was about the 20th of August. I woke up in that bed at Lakeshore Hospital. Holy cow, where am I? And what has gone wrong? And what are these scars on me? And why do I hurt so bad? You know, and I couldn't tell whether I was in a jail or I was in a hospital bed. You know, I was in a room where I was in a bed that had bars on the side. You know, I was like caged in, and I was in a room that looked right at that moment kind of unfriendly. And I said, holy cow, where am I? And what year is this? And what city am I in? And what state am I in? And what has gone wrong? And I decided I need to get out of there. So I worked out of those bars in that bed and got out onto the floor, and my broken left leg gave away, and down I went. And I said, wow. I crawled back in that bed, and I thought, boy, this deal is really bad, because I'm here against my wishes. They've got Judy fooled, and they broke my leg to keep me here. Now, I'll tell you, that's kind of a tough way to come back into the world.
But that's the way you came back?
And that's the way I came back, yeah.
You know, you've kept your humor about this whole thing. I mean, you know, you tell that story and you laugh at yourself. I mean, but it's not a funny story. It's a...
Well, there certainly is lots of seriousness to it. There was lots of agony, right, that went on right then. But, you know, I feel like so many people work so hard, and, you know, this is what happened. We can't change life. You know, hopefully we can do better to make the future better, but we can't change what happened before. And, you know, here I am, and this is the shape I'm in, and so I have to try to make the best of what this is. And, you know, another story that I get a lot of enjoyment out of repeating is I was in one of the therapy classes at Lakeshore one day, you know, and one of the little therapists there, little gal, said to me, boy, don't you wish you'd never raced? And, you know, as I think of that now and think of how really tangled up I was, but then to come up with the answer that I came up with, I got to feel good about that. You know, I said, listen, I look around this hospital and it's full of people, and some of them are hurt worse than I am, and I'm the only one here from racing. So I'm not sorry I raced. I wished I'd have missed that crash, but, or maybe even I wished I would have retired that morning, but I didn't. But I am not sorry I raced. And, you know, I've said over and over that Lakeshore was such an incredible help to me, because they knew the right kind of physical care to take of me, but they also were able to you know, give me the right kind of things to help my head get straightened out, you know, and the memory that came back, you know, and it came back really slow for a while, you know, just like I said, I didn't know whether it was, well, one of the things that I did that kind of tells about the memory part of it, I started arguing with Judy. I got to get out of here because I got to win that championship. I ain't never won it. I've got to win it. And so she said, you already won it. Just calm down on that. You already won it. No, I got to get out because I got to win that championship. So she brought a Winston Cup Illustrated magazine that had the picture of the Waldorf Astoria with the Miller 22 car in front of it, you know, my car that I won the championship. Yeah, I did win it, didn't I? and that kind of brought another section of this thing back into reality for me.
Did you visit him when he was at Lakeshore going through all this, Davey, or did you?
I did some. You know, while he's going through his classes, I tried to let him have that time to concentrate on the things he needed to be concentrated on. One of the things that they had was, one of the classes that they had was an occupational therapy. And they asked us to bring something to the hospital that pertained to his work that he could maybe take apart and put back together. I said, well, hey, you know, I got a carburetor sitting down here that probably needs to be gone through anyways, and I'll just take it to them, let them tinker with it. I took a couple of screwdrivers over there and a carburetor and dropped it off. Next day I went back and he had the thing all apart, had his reading glasses on, and he's looking the thing around, and you know, while I'm standing there just kind of watching and talking to him a little bit, he puts the thing all the way back together. You know, just took it all apart, put it all the way back together. And so they let him keep, I just said, just keep it up here, you know, I got another carburetor that I can use. And so that's what he did. He tinkered around with that thing some, and I don't recall what happened to it since then, but, you know, it was kind of neat to be able to see that. But the rest of the time, I went to visit him, like, in the evenings after everything was over with and he was resting, and well, I had a pretty good bit of stuff going on at that time, too, so I was pretty busy.
Bobby, you were one of the busiest, when you was racing back in the 80s, you was the busiest race car driver in the industry. But the things you did then is different than the drivers do today. You raced 4 or 5 nights a week, right?
Yeah.
Now you're as busy now, today, in 1991, as your dad ever was, but it's not so much the racing aspect.
Well, times have changed. You know, corporate USA is involved now, and they're investing these big dollars in sponsorships, and they want some return off of it other than just the exposure that the race car earns. You know, the television exposure or radio. They want us to go out and help promote their products. And, you know, like this year for Texaco, I'll probably do somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 appearances, which are 2-hour autograph sessions or promotional giveaways where they have drawings for different things, or just got back from the Beacon Lab up in New York where they had an employee day. So I am as busy, but it's doing a different type of work now. And I enjoy it just as much as I would, you know, if I was in another time and another place and racing 5 or 6 nights a week. Well, I shouldn't say as much, because I really enjoy racing. And I would love to be able to race 4 or 5 nights a week, plus race in the Winston Cup races on Sunday. But this is what it takes. It's part of the job now, and I don't regret it. Let's put it that way.
How much, you see Bobby was still racing. When he won the Daytona 500 in 1988, at that point was the oldest driver to ever win a Winston Cup race. Now Harry Gant's come along and has beaten that record. As far as you know, do you think you'll be up in the 50s still trying to race?
Harry Gant added another year to my career, so I got 21 more years to go. I'm 30 now, and Harry was 51 when he won at Talladega this year, and I told him after that, he and my dad are my heroes, because Dad won the Daytona 500 at 50, and he won at Talladega when he's 51, so I got a lot of time left. I got a lot of goals out there that I want to achieve, but that gives me a little bit more time.
You just had a son, Robert Gray. We know where Robert came from. You've got a grandson named after you now, Bobby. Are you going to have him out in the shop out back where with Red and the boys when he gets up?
He already bought him a fishing rod, but he might be looking for a driver's suit for him too.
Well, let's put it this way. Before he was born, the people who do our uniforms had already made one up for Krista a couple of years ago. We had a picture taken at Daytona, and when they found out that this baby was coming, they made one for him too. And you know, it's going to be pretty neat to, when he gets to a point where we can put him in it and have pictures made. But you know, I got to say this: I really enjoy what I've been involved in all my life in this business. But what's made it so enjoyable is that he let me make the choice.
Bobby, you remember that picture?
I see that picture a lot, and I do remember bits and pieces of that situation there, Benny, yeah.
This is Davey's car on fire in Darlington, and you jumping the fence to go to his aid.
He was going to the aid of a ghost because I was gone. But he didn't know that. And, you know, he saw the fireman sitting there poking that fire extinguisher in the window, and he's thinking that I'm in there on fire and the guy's trying to put me out. So
that really is an unbelievable picture. You leaping that fence and...
Yeah, I have a copy of that down in my office that is there amongst my really prized pictures. You know, that was my son that had driven that car, and I wonder if I could have responded that well for someone else, and I'm not really sure. But you know, I got burned real bad early in my career one time at Dixie Speedway, the track we talked about earlier, up here. It was just on the west side of Birmingham, and was sitting in the car on fire and got burns on my arms and my back and all. And I know how mean that fire can be, and you sure don't want your son in there. I'm hoping that I don't want anybody else's son in there either, you know, but as I look at that picture, you know, I can see a guy that really was concerned that harm might be going to somebody that he did dearly love and had a lot of, you know, a lot of future for and all too.
You know something, I can too. I can see everything you just said. I can look at the picture and see that. I got to talk about Kyle Petty. We talked to him. You, Coca-Cola, when did they start sponsoring? 1971 or
70.
In 1970, who talked those people into going to the Coca-Cola people? Was that the first commercial sponsor that in racing?
It probably was, and the deal came together through the efforts of Mike Bailey. He had met a guy in the Coke deal by the name of Vic Minert, and they had talked about the racing thing. And you know, the Coke sponsorship for 71 was probably $50,000 for the year.
Wow.
It might have been 75, but it was way under 100. And in fact, I'll even tell the next story on that. When I went with Junior for the 72 season, Coke wanted to go with Junior, and Junior, of course, wanted the sponsor. Junior wanted $100,000, and Coke would only pay 85. So I paid the 15 difference.
Did you really?
To make it go, you know, just... and, you know, Junior and I had a really good year. I left at the end of that year. I had made plans before I ever went with Junior that 73 would be the year that I would go ahead and try to do my own deal. And I thought it was going to be quite a bit different than it ended up working out, but still put that deal together with Junior and went through the year. And I guess the very last little piece of business that Junior and I did, I still have to respect today, because I won the Olsenite Driver of the Year award, and our agreement was that we shared everything. And Junior turned to me and said, "You keep that. You paid that Coke money so you keep that. That was kind of a neat way to go away from that thing, being that I had to go away.
He was the racing driver of the year in 1972. Well, with Coca-Cola, Kyle Petty was telling us, Davey, that Coca-Cola had everything. They had T-shirts and they had pants with Coca-Cola all over them.
Floppy hat.
Floppy hats. He said he was so envious. He said every Allison kid in the world had some of those Coca-Cola pants.
And we all wore them.
Everywhere you went.
Everywhere.
That was the neatest thing, you know, to see my dad out there in the car they call the Coke machine, and we had the original designer clothing, Coca-Cola pants and Coca-Cola shirts and Coca-Cola hats.
And all those little kids eating their heart out, right?
Yeah, every once in a while we'd let one wear a hat, but the pants and the shirts, we didn't let them get out of our sight.
For the Allisons, racing is truly a family affair. You got brothers, cousins, uncles, all part of the family. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I had lots of fun. See you soon.